So you want to collect battle chips and PETs. I don't blame you. They're among the coolest merch in all of Mega Man. They're among my favorite things to collect in general. In this video, we're going to be covering all the basics when it comes to battle chips and PETs. And then if you guys enjoy it, maybe I'll consider making a more in-depth series on each of the types of battle chips. So right away, these blue ones are probably the most familiar because these ones kind of replicate the feeling of what chips look like in the anime and in the Battle Network video games. But actually, the very first chips that were ever made are these little white ones right here. These are called plug-in chips because they go with this PET, the plug-in PET. If you're wondering where that name comes from, by the way, jacking in is what it's called in like the English localization, but you know, in Japan and other regions, they call plugging in, right? So that's why this is called the plug-in PET. Definitely the most iconic PET by far. You know, it's the one that's used in the first season of the anime. It's used in BN3, everyone's favorite Battle Network. Better be your favorite. And of course, you have these little white chips too. So you can see that the white chips do, you know, insert really nicely inside right here. And the funny thing about these chips is that they have really awful names. Like they're not really based in any of the video game lore. We've got, you know, we've got Leaf right here. You know, I'm pretty sure this one's called Heart. Yep, this is Heart. You know, we've got Guts, not Guts Punch or anything, just Guts. And, you know, you might even think this one would be called Ice, but unfortunately, nope, it's just cool. Very, very cool. Anyway, those are the first generation of them, and a few of these white chips are really rare, and in fact, this is just like a small handful of the amount that you get. But that being said, you know, they're not the most exciting when it comes to chips. There's, gosh, I don't even know how many there are. It's like, there's probably less than 15. In fact, 15 might even be kind of a high number for them. Again, these blue chips right here are probably what most people are familiar with, and that's because they were released in the United States and other regions of the world, including Europe. Now, these are called advanced chips because they go with the advanced PET. This is the model that you see in Axis in the anime, that you see in Battle Network 4, and that's really what these chips are. These chips are all Battle Network 4 chips, right? So, you know, Magnum, for example, we've got, you know, Search. I think this is Search Bomb, Search Grenade. I have a hard time with some of the secret chips in the game, but regardless, that's what those are. Now, these are pretty interesting, right? Because again, do have different languages for these chips. Right off the bat, you've got a few different variations here. Like here's an attack plus 10, and you can see that it's got English letters on it. I know my my focus is not the best on my secondary cam, but you can see it's got the actual name attack 10 on it as well. But this is also a different kind of chip right here, right? We've got CP. At a certain point in the development of these battle chips and just kind of like the line in general, they shifted from using English names to, you know, generic number names. Now, there's a number of like speculative reasons why they do that. My biggest reason, or at least the thought in my head is, you know, the company that started producing these started making them like, you know, in Europe and different parts of the world. So, you know, rather than having to translate every single name, you know, into like maybe Spanish or German or something else like that, I think they opted instead to just go for like a generic like CP and a number. The other reason you might say is because, well, you know, CP numbers have an effect when you're actually playing with the PET itself, right? Like these actually, you know, determine the power of chips and like what kinds of chips you can use. So like maybe, you know, they wanted to display that information somewhere that's helpful for people. Regardless of the reason you pick, you know, they do end up selecting CP for most of the other chips. So there is like a selection of actual English chips for the names, but they're pretty small and rare. There's also blank chips too, which I might show off in a more in-depth video regarding this. And I will say the last thing that's kind of fun to talk about with the advanced PET is Navi data chips. So these are all, you know, holographic, beautiful, you know, different chips that represent Navis that you can find in Battle Network 4. Although, you know, eagle-eyed fans might recognize, you know, a few that don't really show up in Battle Network 4. Like, for example, Shadow Man right here, you know, he was in BN2, he was in BN5. You know, you've got Iceman, who was only in BN1, even though he was really, really prominent in the anime. You know, my boy Elecman, my number one, coming in here. So these particular chips that weren't actually in Battle Network 4, they are for Battle Network 4.5, which is its own Game Boy Advance game that was never released outside of Japan. It absolutely breaks my heart. In fact, I would say 4.5 was the reason I became such like a hardcore battle chip fanatic, because there was always this like, I don't know, sort of exotic, you know, mysticism when it comes to like going to GameFAQs.com as a kid and like, what the heck is 4.5? Like there's a whole game with real life battle chips that you can use. Now, if you're curious about it, you would use a peripheral called the Battle Chip Gate. This is, you know, a boxed version right here that I can show off just a little bit. Really, the only thing that matters is this top part, because that's what actually goes inside of the Game Boy Advance. This bottom part right here is just a chip loader. It's just like a fancy way, you know, to hold on to your chips. You know, actually, arguably not even really that fancy, but, you know, it is what it is, and it's a lot of fun. And you can see on the back, again, not the best camera that I've got right here, but you can see that they talk about how the chips, you know, slot in to the PET as well. And actually, you can see a little bit of the gameplay that's that's used here, because actually when this device first came out, like this particular brand of Battleship Gate, there was no 4.5, it was only Battle Network 4, and I can actually show you a little bit right here, you know, that actual Battle Network 4 itself was compatible with this Battleship Gate right here. This is my own custom Game Boy Advance that I'm quite proud of. I did, well, you know, I didn't make it completely from scratch, but, you know, I bought all of the pieces for the shell to get like a half white, half black, you know, kind of setup going with Proto Man, which I think is kind of fun. So anyway, this is the Japanese version of the game, just because that's the easiest for me to have on me at the moment. But rest assured that this actually is totally functional in English. It almost makes you want to cry, because Capcom, you know, possibly thought to themselves, hey, like maybe we could release this outside of Japan, or maybe even outside of Korea, because I think Korea also had the version as well. But, you know, c'est la vie. That's just life. Now, I am going to reinsert it. It's kind of hard to see with Japanese, but basically, you know, Mr. Famous is asking for, you know, the battle chip to get slotted in. Of course, these are, you know, almost 20 years old, so they're kind of hard at times to actually, you know, read. You have to insert it a few times. Sometimes you got to take a Q-tip and kind of clean off the pins. But regardless, you know, you can boot up the game, which is fun. There's a whole mode where basically the Navi takes over, you know, all of the movements that you do. The custom gauge fills up, and as soon as the custom gauge turns yellow, you can slot in a standard chip like this Magnum right here, and let's see what happens. Yep, kind of fun. Obviously, I missed Magnum being a great chip, but kind of hard to use in general like that, right? So anyway, fun stuff. You can show it off like there. And again, 4.5, a really, really cool game, because the game was entirely built with this Battle Chip Gate peripheral in mind, this guy right here. In fact, this Proto Man version, a little bit more rare than the blue one, not like extremely rare or anything, but a little bit less common, and that's because it came with 4.5, a really, really cool version of the game that's basically just like a deluxe box, right? You can see you've got Proto Man right here in terms of the gates. And actually, some of the chips up top are really quite special. You know, you've got Starman, who, you know, never made an appearance in a mainline Battle Network game. He did first show up in the GameCube one, Network Transmission, of course. And I guess he had kind of like a small role in the anime as well. And then, of course, Z-Saber. Are you kidding me? Like, what a freaking cool chip. Gotta love to see that. As well as a few other chips as well. So it all came bundled together in this cool little box, basically like a special edition. So you didn't need this box if you already had the blue chip gate that I showed off a little earlier, but you've got it right there, and it's really quite cool. So anyway, Battle Network 4 and advanced chips are extremely cool, no doubt about it. Now, how about progress chips right here? Now, these guys are a little bit more interesting. In fact, they're kind of my personal favorite chips, just because, I don't know, they're like a little more sleek than the others, and they're kind of like the dark horse. They're really a lot more rare than 4 and 6. 4 and 6 had like a lot of, you know, special features that really like tied them together with the games. BN5, not so much, a bit more of a dark horse in terms of the merch. So this right here is a special chip. This is Element Power, which is a chip that you don't normally get to see in the actual video games, which I think is kind of fun. And that's another cool thing about having these real-life chips. Oftentimes, they made promotional chips that you just didn't get to see in the games at all. And obviously, Dark Sword is definitely a chip that you use in BN5, because you can, you know, Chaos Unison, you can transform into, you know, the Dark Proto Man Chaos Unison. But, you know, still, there are quite a few that were just, like, never existed in any other way, shape, or form, which I think is really fun. And it kind of adds a lot more, I don't know, excitement when it comes to putting together your games. In fact, actually, I'll show off one other one right here. This chip is called Marking, which actually also came in that little Proto Man box gate I just showed off. This one is really cool. It basically turns your Navi invincible, like the green fanfare invincibility, for like a good few seconds, while your Navi just kind of spams his buster and does his work. So a cool chip. Again, not a chip you'll ever see in any mainline game, right? You know, it's not in BN4. It's not in BN5, although interestingly, it's definitely programmed in BN4, because the game can read the battle chip if you were to insert it into the chip. So fun stuff right there. But again, BN5, very, very cool. And I'll show off another kind of fun thing about BN5. These guys right here, this is the Progress PET. Of course, it's in the Stream anime. This is the only backwards compatible feature in the entirety of collecting battleships. The only thing, even the gate that you use for the Game Boy Advance is not backwards compatible. Only the PET is. I don't know why that's the case, but, you know, you certainly love that that is the case, because it's fun to, you know, go back in time and use all your special chips, which I think is really fun. And of course, you know, you have Navi data chips, just like the ones I showed off earlier. Here we got Magnet Man right here. Now, unlike BN4, you're only limited to the chips that you would see in actually playing the game, right? You're not going to be getting, you know, any crazy extra ones like Iceman or Elecman or anything like that. They're entirely, you know, Navis that you see from actually just playing BN5, which actually I guess makes them the most limited in terms of like the variety, right? Because there's what, 6 Soul Unisons in each game, and then Mega Man himself, so that's 13 different Navi data chips. So not nearly as many as the others, but still quite cool. And I will say another fun thing about this with like a chip like Napalm Man, right? Napalm Man, of course, is in BN5, but Napalm Man is also one of the 4.5 Navis that you can use. So if you have the old school Napalm Man right here, this will also allow you to Soul Unison, right? Because it's backwards compatible. Very, very cool. So yeah, I love the BN5 PET, and I guess one last thing to talk about it is they have all these like little peripherals, right? So like on the top and the bottom, there are slots for accessories, and this is basically, you know, it's L for electric, and it adds a little bit of an elect body effect to your Navi. And there's a top slot too. So basically slotting in these peripherals not only are kind of fun and cool in terms of like the aesthetic of your PET, but they're also functional with the game. I'm not the biggest expert with actually playing the PET games. I'm not like a huge, you know, Tamagotchi gamer kind of guy, even though I do love collecting the PETs, you know. So if anyone in the comments knows more about it, or if I'm even wrong about this type of information, do let me know, because I'm not an expert in that at all. And I guess actually before we move on from BN5, I should also say, of course, there is a gate. I know I talked about it a little earlier, but you know, this special Proto Man gate right here does indeed work with BN5. And it also does work with the English one as well. If we get to a video on the, you know, a deep dive, I'll be sure to cover that in greater detail. Very, very cool stuff. Finally, we've got arguably the coolest system for an entire game that you've got. This is the Link PET, and this PET right here is one that you find in Battle Network 6, as well as the Beast and Beast Plus anime. There are so many Link PETs. They have the most diversity by far, and the reason why is simple, right? You've got the body of the PET, like this one's white compared to this one right here being black, right? But then there's also like the skin. You can pop off the top of your Link PETs, the curtain, right? You can kind of pull back this. You can slot out a skin. You can even take off the emblem, or even change like the color of the ring. So while it's true that you can buy a lot of different types of PETs or starter kits that have like the emblem that you want to represent, and you know, maybe like, you know, this one being more of a tomahawk style, you know, you can go all in on your Navi and like really, you know, have a lot of fun, like, you know, repping them proudly. But you can also get really creative and start mixing and matching, like, oh, I like this white ring, you know, what if I move that over there? You know, what if I, you know, take this, you know, gold Proto Man, you know, ring, and I move that over, I'll take the emblem and I'll slot it somewhere else. I think it's a really, really fun system, you know, for accessories, you know, not, you know, no different gameplay features like you'd find in BN5 with like the different types of peripherals that you insert, but still extremely cool, I have to say. Now, Navi data is more exciting in this game as well. I'll show off this sealed Proto Man box that I've got. You can see that a Proto Man data chip is in here. And if you were to use that on your Game Boy Advance using a Beast Link gate, which I'll show up in a little bit, you could actually play as Proto Man in the game, right? That's the only way to actually control Proto Man in Battle Network 6, which I think is fun. There are also some other Navis that they added to those games, like Base, you know, Kernel, different ones like that. Those are not playable. I guess that they, maybe in this day and age of DLC and patches, like they probably could have made it compatible, but, you know, since those are just Game Boy cartridges, I guess those were just, you know, new ideas that they just didn't, you know, maybe account for with BN6, or maybe the game was full. You know, we always hear that like Battle Network 6 was kind of like a long game in terms of, or a hard game in terms of like, you know, compressing all the data into it, right? So that could very well be the case as well. But yeah, there's really a lot of cool stuff with BN6. Those different Navi data chips, like I was showing earlier, that Proto Man, let me see if I can pull out a close-up one here, right? So we've got Elect Man, my boy, my favorite Navi, absolutely love him. He's got this little like indentation, right? Like there's a little slot with, you know, like if you were to compare that to like this one right here, this old Navi data chip, it's just flat, right? Like there's no data in it beyond, you know, the pins. But this one right here, I don't know if it's a battery or a flash card or something. Someone knowledgeable in the comments can definitely give us the right answer for it. But basically, these store data, right? So you can level up your Elect Man by using him with your PET. For whatever reason, you don't level him up with the Game Boy Advance game, but still, when you level him up with the PET, you would have actual Elect Man in there. He would go from level 1 to 2 to 3, all the way up to 99. You can bring him back into your Game Boy Advance game where he's stronger. He's got more HP, you know, more abilities, things like that. And then if you're lucky enough to actually play the Battle Chip Stadium arcade machine in Japan, he would also get additional powers in that game as well. So a really cool system between the PET, between the Game Boy Advance game, and between the arcade machine. You know, there was really like a trifecta of cool stuff that happened, you know, in terms of like connectivity. I think they called it the Navi Link system, or the Link Navi system. So very, very cool. And yeah, I think that's kind of going to be it in terms of just showing off very briefly all of the different aspects of, you know, these different battle chips and things. This is the Advanced PET2 right here. Again, I think I'll have a lot of fun just kind of making more in-depth videos on each of them, especially if you're curious. This is the Beast Gate right here I was just talking about. And again, actually, this emblem can be swapped out, you know, freely as well if you want to use that Gregor emblem, if you want to put Electman or whatever. Very, very cool stuff. And yeah, there's so much merch, you guys. There's like, you know, battle chip files, there's wristbands, there's like little mini PET holders. I mean, I absolutely love this stuff. It's my favorite hobby by far. I do love collecting video games like sealed and complete in box, like retro video games, like a lot as well. You know, even like Pokemon cards, like that's fun too, but like cards are so overdone, right? There's something so fun about like these physical battle chips, right? They're collectible just like cards. They have actual in-game uses, which is fun. You can, if you enjoy the Tamagotchi style gameplay PETs, you can use them on that. To me, there's nothing more emblematic of the Battle Network series than like having chips and PETs together. I just think they're the coolest thing in the entire world. I'm a huge fanboy when it comes to them. I've got trophies and really cool stuff to show off. So again, if you have any questions, do let me know. I really want to make this a fun series. Again, my name is Scoutmaster Demi. I play every single DS game on Twitch, and I'm making a lot of YouTube videos on it. Hope to see you guys there. Definitely consider subscribing if you want to learn more about battle chips, and I'll catch you later, Scouts.